Go.
Right, so this PowerPoint presentation is about applied research in sports and exercise science. So, what is research defined as? Research is defined as the creation of new knowledge and/or the existing knowledge in a new creative way to generate new concepts, methodologies and understandings. This could include synthesis and analysis of previous research to the extent it leads to new and creative outcomes. My definition of research, however, is the process of looking for new ideas or reinforcing already discovered ideas. I agree with the Google definition as it shows the purpose of research is to find new information or back up old information. Primary research is research that gains information from first-hand perspective. The Google definition is primary research is data that is obtained first-hand. This means that the researcher conducts the research themselves or commissions the data to be collected on their behalf. Primary research means going out directly to the source rather than relying on pre-existing data samples. Primary research is important as it keeps the research specific to what it is they are looking at. It also is important as it ensures the research is correct. That's the first type of research. The second type of research is secondary research, which is where people get their information from things like the internet and books instead of performing a study themselves. For example, this could be someone looking at research on a study that has already been conducted and looking at the findings of this type of research is more important as it allows people to be able to get a broad perspective of ideas. However, it also provides details on topic-specific information and is often easier to analyse than primary research. This means that it takes less time for people doing the research to come to a conclusion, which overall helps it to get completed faster.
Okay, so the second slide, this is about the impact of a lack of validity, reliability, accuracy, precision, and it's all on research, reliability and sports science development. So the lack of validity can impact research by implying that the results of the study can deviate from the truth, which just means that researchers can't withdraw from the findings. And then a lack of validity could also mean that the research isn't credible, which can mean it isn't specific enough to the research topic. As well as that, the poor reliability can also cause issues with statistics like the mean and the mode and the consistency of the study's results. This means that for the research to be more credible, more people need to reach the same results and improve the reliability of the research. Accuracy also relates to whether the study being performed measures what it aims to measure. A lack of reliability, validity and accuracy can cause the results from a research to become invalid due to inability to be applied in any other experiments and as to whether the results are actually true, because the lack of accuracy could be missing things like control factors. This stops developments in sports science as research that is not accurate or reliable cannot be published or expanded on, as the data can be inaccurate or just simply untrue.
When working within sport and exercise, you always use research to plan and review your work. This is called evidence-based practice. Evidence-based practice is the practice of applying research to findings in a professional practice. So evidence-based practice is a 5-step process. The first stage to evidence-based practice is asking. So this includes assessing the client, how are they seeing, if they've got any issues. Next is access, asking for any evidence, any past medical history. Next one's appraise the evidence for the validity and usefulness. The next one's apply, so we can apply this into the work and the exercise. Next one is assess, so we can evaluate the effectiveness of the process. So what's the importance of evidence-based practice? Well, evidence-based practice is proven to improve outcomes by making up-to-date research better and improved outcomes for community. In healthcare, for example, evidence-based treatments lead to more effective patient care. Another importance of evidence-based practice is that it enhances accountability. It encourages more solid decisions on evidence rather than intuition or personal bias. And it also promotes consistency as it's more efficient and more easier to track. So there's different types of research in evidence-based practice. We can use primary or secondary, like we said. But an importance of primary research rather than secondary is that it provides new insights that's not been seen before, so you can actually carry out the data yourself rather than trusting someone else. And the importance of secondary research in evidence-based practice is that it takes time by utilising the data, so you don't need to go out and get it, the data, the primary data. It's actually already out there. So, in conclusion, the evidence-based practice is increased in decision making and patient outcomes, so it's increased in time, it's quicker for you, there's less errors, and it's very efficient. It's a really cost-effective solution, really. So, yeah. The next is in the importance of research.
So on this slide, we've got the importance of research. So you've got it obviously improves performance research, injury prevention and recovery research, and mental health and performance research. So for the improving performance research, it helps athletes perform better by providing evidence-based strategies for training, nutrition and recovery. An example of this is Michael Phelps, the most decorated Olympic swimmer, benefited from research on stroke technique and nutrition. This contributed to his dominance in the pool. Then we've got injury prevention and recovery research. This is in biomechanics, physiotherapy and sport medicine. It helps in understanding the causes of injuries and developing strategies to prevent them. And then it's research into recovery techniques. So for example, like ice baths, massage and nutrition. This has also improved how athletes recover after intense training or competition. And then last we've got the mental health and performance. The psychological aspect of sports performance is another critical area of research. This studies on mental toughness, anxiety management and focus techniques. This has allowed athletes to improve the mental game. For instance, sports psychology research has helped athletes like Serena Williams and Novak Djokovic overcome pressure.
So next we're going to say what would happen without research. So a stagnation of athletic performance means without research, sport would rely solely on trial and error methods, which means athletes would mean out on scientifically proven techniques to enhance performance, leading to less efficient training, which would result in a decrease in performance in games and probably potential slower progress in themselves, really. The next would be increased risk of injury. Without research in biomechanics and sport and medicine, the understanding of sports injuries would be limited. So in sports like rugby and football, the risk of head injuries, concussions would be really high because there wouldn't be the backing behind it to tell people not to play for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because it can damage if they play it again. Without research into concussion, safety measures like helmet design or return to play guidelines would be non-existent. And the last one without research is mental health support. Research into sports psychology has been instrumental, so providing people with pressures, with competitions, with cup games, friendlies, league games, anything is helpful. Without research, many athletes will have increased anxiety, depression rates, lead to burnout, which will cause injuries, which could significantly affect their careers and their well-being. So this is a mental aspect of the performance which might not be addressed, which should be addressed really, leading to a decreased mental resilience and higher dropout rates in sport.
Right. Research ethics are vital in sports and exercise research, as if without any ethics, it almost makes this research discredited. Because if you don't have that previous ethical clearing from the participants and the higher up bodies, then your research is almost null and void. Anyway, the British Association of Sports and Exercise Science, also known as BASIS, has a research code of conduct. The BASIS code of conduct consists of many policies to protect participants and researchers. These are informed consent, competence from researchers, confidentiality of personal data from participants, data protection, so that's the same lines, so that is not spreading around any data and making sure it's locked away or even deleted after use. And so, ethics are vital to be maintained within research, as participants must be able to withdraw their consent whenever they are participating to maintain validity of the research. Well, so there is many sort of circumstances, I covered them briefly just then, of what can happen when ethics are not used within research. So, if research ethics aren't followed, it can lead to physical and psychological harm of participants. So this could be, for example, if a sports medicine research project was being created, a first-time project, then they might end up being prescribed some medication that could cause serious physiological harm to the body. So this could that be an increase in blood pressure or a decrease in blood pressure or like blood thickness or thinning, which could ultimately, if there's underlying conditions that have not been disclosed, it could be life-threatening. Also, the psychological harm. For example, this could be if an injury is sustained during a research project, it could lead to psychological trauma and could make the participant a bit sort of out of reach from sport and exercise and almost lose their motivation to participate. Secondly, it can lead to impediment within processes of sports research, or sports science research actually. So, impeded, pretty much, to sum it up, that means a delay almost. So that pretty much means there's a delay, or there could be a delay in sports science research. So if let's say there's a sports researcher that is disclosing discredited, that's information that should be discredited, that's not true, because they either may be performing the research project with not much validity or reliability or even accuracy or precision, then it can lead to the wrong outcomes, which can ultimately lead to wrong data being disclosed. An example of this within the modern day is potentially the use of the the old sort of research project that was completed that states about microtears in muscle fibres. However, there's some research projects research coming out now that proves that there's other ways of muscle growth and it's not just the microtears. So that is one way of impediment within processes of sports science and exercise research. Moreover, there is legal consequences. For example, if you don't follow the consent of what the participants have give, this could lead you into potential, you could potentially get the sports science body sued, you sued. It can also question your credibility as a sports scientist. It also can, undermine the whole industry if you're not careful. So you have to follow your consent and your ethical clearing and make sure participants are always informed that they can withdraw at any time. And finally, just covered it then, but it also can damage careers within the industry. So let's say if you're performing the wrong sort of research, it can cause other scientists to want to jump on this sort of bandwagon almost to starting to do that research on that. And once that gets discredited, it can potentially be a lot of wasted time and can ruin their credibility, which ultimately can ruin their career.
So what are the ethics and ethical clearance on sports and science research? So we've got the data protection. This is vital to ensure that the confidentiality and privacy of participants in sports science research. Research in this field often involves sensitive information such as medical histories, physical assessments and performance metrics. The use of personal data in the research is governed by various laws and ethical guidelines such as the General Data Protection Regulation, which is also known as GDPR, in the European Union, or Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act in the United States. These regulations ensure that the personal data is collected, stored and processed within explicit consent from participants. Next one, we've got the informed consent. This is one of the cornerstone ethical principles in any research involving human participants. It's also important, like, for the people participating too, and the researchers. So for the sports scientists, obtaining informed consent means like providing participants with sufficient information about the research's purpose, procedures, potential risks, and benefits, allowing them to make an educated decision about their participation. For example, Kerr and McKay, this is in 2019, these emphasise that research ethics committees require a clear explanation of potential risks, including any possibility of injury or discomfort during the physical testing. It's really important to make sure that like the participants are feeling comfortable and like trust the researchers. Obviously, if this doesn't work, then it's most likely that they're going to opt out of it. That obviously affects the research, like within the researchers. And then we've also got the working with areas of expertise. So ethical research in sports science also involves working only with one areas of expertise. For example, sports scientists specialising in biomechanics should also avoid conducting studies that require medical expertise, such as involving like complex medical diagnosis or interventions. Health in 2020 argued that ethical guidelines dictate that the researchers shouldn't overstep the like boundaries, as it may like jeopardise the safety of participants or leading to misled findings. So then last, we've got the subject welfare. So the welfare of research participants is at the heart of ethical sports of science research. Protecting participants from physical, emotional, psychological harm during experiments is like really important. It's like one of the most like #1 followed rules in research. Zamboni in 2021 discussed how ethical clearance committees assess studies based on the risks to benefit ratio. The welfare of participants should always be prioritised in any research involving vulnerable populations. For example, like children or athletes with disabilities should be carefully monitored. Obviously, it's important to take in consideration like how they feel, especially with like different sort of populations, like I said. And then in sports science, physical performance testing, nutritional assessments or psychological intervention could pose risks such as physical injury or mental stress. Ethical guidelines ensure that researchers have implemented strategies to minimise these risks, such as like providing proper supervision, monitoring and ensuring that participants can obviously withdraw at any time without any penalties. And then on the board you can see all the links and the references made. So yeah, that's the ethics and ethical clearance on sports science research.
So the importance of ethics, like everyone's been stated, in sport cannot be overstated. It directly influences the ability of professionals in this field to adapt the evidence-based practice with the research, primary and secondary, when working with clients. Ethical principles provide a framework for ensuring that research interventions are carried out responsibly and safely, but also with respect for the right and well-being of the clients, because they're the #1 priority. This is crucial for maintaining trust and delivering effective, safe and scientifically grounded practices. So the five top importance notes to take from ethics and the importance is to ensure client welfare, to make sure informed consent and client autonomy is there, to have professional competence and boundaries, evidence-based interviews for diverse populations to make sure everyone's included, and maintaining professional integrity. So next slide, we're going to go on to add individual topics, and the first one's physiology. What is Josh using?
No, it's me.
Oh, yeah.
So the physiology aspect of in this presentation. So one of the lit reviews that I did. So we've got the effect of altitude training on the aerobic capacity of athletes. This was a systematic review and meta-analysis. A meta-analysis means like one whole research projects, and they've like picked out different like files and literature reviews, and then put them all together and assess them all at the end. So one of the strengths of this case was the 2 reviewers independently screened the literature, extracted the data and checked them for validity. In case of like the disagreement, a 3rd reviewer was consulted. This is like from like a 3rd person's view. This just like makes the data kind of more accurate. So obviously if the data was lacking, they'd contact the corresponding author to obtain additional information. This acknowledges the importance of face validity, as obtaining information allows clients to trust the research methods. The article achieves face validity as the test appears to measure what it intends to, as it shows in the results that they measured the aerobic capacity and discovered that altitude training does have better effects than other regimes on athletes' aerobic capacity. Specifically, they suggest that the altitude training is conducted about 2,500 metres and to last about 3 weeks, which is more effective. However, the weaknesses of this review, no part of the article suggests that the participants signed consent forms or were ran through what they were participating for. This is obviously important for the informed consent of ethical research. Even if this was the case and they did sign the consent forms, it's obviously not included in the article, which suggests that the participants weren't aware of this. The article solely focuses on the methods, results, conclusions and how to begin research. This shows that the article lacks face validity, as it doesn't provide any information about gaining the trust and maintaining the trust between the researchers and their participants, as well as no information about the research tools being accepted by the participants. One more weakness of this article was the fact that the researchers were unable to analyse internal and external factors in the meta-analysis. Obviously there's going to be quite a few weaknesses in this article, because obviously it's a meta-analysis. Like I said, they're picking out different articles and like reviewing them as a whole at the end.
So, strength and conditioning. According to Warwick University, strength and conditioning is the practical application of sports science to enhance movement quality to improve performance. So, an example of where an S&C coach would be used would be in a professional sporting setting. So, for example, someone who has a degree in strength and conditioning could work at a sports club like, let's say, Manchester United. The head strength and conditioning coach will help plan out their training regimes to help develop leg strength. So in the rectus femoris, your key quadricep muscles that make it up. So for example, they might do higher frequency of squatting movements, or potentially unilateral leg extensions to help develop that shot power. So for example, Bruno Fernandes, who's the main free kick taker for Manchester United, or even penalty taker, would work on the single or unilateral leg extension to help develop that overall explosive power within the rectus femoris and the surrounding quadriceps muscles. Back to what I was saying, strength and conditioning is vital within professional athletes to allow them to obtain and gain physical advantages over their opposition. These consist of different varieties and components of fitness, which are strength increase. So for example, a rugby player would require higher amounts of strength than, for example, a golf player. So a rugby player's training regime will be different to a golf player's, because they'll have to focus on the main compound movements like squats, bench presses, to help develop that key upper body strength within the pectoralis major, the triceps brachii and your anterior deltoid. Moreover, especially with the bench press, due to it being a free weight movement, it would be more important using a dumbbell. However, due to it being a free weight movement, it helps develop the subscapular rotator cuff muscles like your suprasupinatus and infrasupinatus. Helps develop strength, which prevents injuries within the long run for rugby players, for example, within a scrum or making a ruck or a tackle. Moreover, explosive power, so that's linking back into what I said about Bruno Fernandes being the Manchester United, would do a lot of unilateral leg work to help develop that shot power. A key example of someone who had high shot power due to his unilateral leg work was Hulk, the Brazilian footballer. he had one of the strongest free kicks, and this was due to him performing high frequency unilateral leg work. Moreover, agility. So the main test for this is the Illinois agility test. So football clubs might perform that test frequently to help gauge where the athletes or the players' sort of agility throughout. So ways in doing this, it's the definition of agility, to sum it up, it's being able to change directions at high speeds. So a way they might perform this is by having the personal trainer or the coach for, let's say, the England Rugby Union backs coach. What they might do, they'll shout the players to sprint out, and then the head coach will shout a direction to turn instantly once they've reached the top speed. And the goal will be not to drop speed, because this will help develop that explosiveness to turn into the direction, which overall develops agility. Right, so moreover, speed. So speed is how fast somebody can move the limbs across the ground. So this can be arms and legs. So for example, a winger in rugby league, someone like Josh Chandler, would require high amounts of speed when breaking through a tackle. So once they've broke through a tackle, they'll have to be able to outpace the opposite player, so like the centre, the winger, and they'll have to be able to outpace the fullback. So a way players might, well, a strength and conditioning coach may increase their performance speed is by implementing HIIT training or high intensity interval training. So this is going at a high, well, RPE scale of about, this consists of 9 to 10, so this is the maximum for about 10 to 15 seconds. So you might follow 10 seconds to 15 seconds on, 30 seconds off, solely to just increase this overall speed. And finally, cardiovascular endurance is the ability of the heart and other cardiac involvement to maintain over a prolonged period of time. So, for example, a tennis player will require high amounts of cardiovascular endurance due to matches potentially going on for over 3 hours long. So when they might perform this is by performing continuous training by, let's say, performing just runs, so like 10k runs. It's not specific to the sport, however, it can translate over very simply. Examples of methods to optimise these components of fitness are altitude training to increase cardiovascular endurance. This occurs by the increase of oxyhemoglobin within the bloodstream. Blood flow restriction training. So these are used by bands being wrapped around key limbs. So you might wrap a blood flow restriction band around your leg when performing, or hip when performing squats and other unilateral leg work or lateral leg work to help develop muscular endurance and to help develop muscular hypertrophy. It will increase endurance due to the lack of blood flow going through, which will help the body to overcome the build-up of waste products like lactate and lactic acid. Finally, high intensity interval training or HIIT training is impeccable for developing speed and power, especially explosive power, due to it being at such a high RPE and such a short period of time. An example of where they might do, how you can increase your speed and power using HIIT training is by using an elliptical treadmill, as this goes at whatever pace you're able to run at. Moreover, one article that I've researched in a literature review that is key for any strength and conditioning coach is a meta-analysis on frequency of training. However, there's a couple negatives to this meta-analysis. One of these is due to it being performed in 2018, so potentially the data is slightly outdated as of now. However, it does still align with other articles that have been produced. Moreover, another negative of this meta-analysis is the fact that it doesn't provide any ethical or any sort of use of ethics throughout it. Also, so it could potentially mean that the participants have not been informed about the consent being required to participate in this research, and moreover, if anything did happen to the clients, the research could be held liable and potentially get criminal charges or prosecuted. However, the positives of this is that it has high amounts of external validity due to so many articles being compiled together coming towards the same sort of end goal, it shows that the research must be accurate, as they're all leading to the same point, which is that the frequency you seek better results of muscular hypertrophy whilst performing a higher frequency training. So this consists of, the way they planned this out was by performing, so one way they did this was by performing a single joint active movements. So let's say a bicep curl, as this requires one joint and multi-joint movements. It's like your compound movements like bench press, squat, deadlift. So the way they did this, they had the client perform single and multi-joint movements, not client, participants perform them. So there was 2 separate groups on one of the studies. Group A performed it once to twice a week, and Group B performed it 4 to 5 times a week. And it was proven that Group B saw significant results in strength increase, hypertrophy increase, and muscular endurance increase, and also power. And this is because of the increased frequency. So this meta-analysis proves that frequency should be implemented within all training. So what does this mean for strength and conditioning? Well, this study helps capitalise on the use of frequency. So for example, if a footballer is performing a gym session once a week, that won't see him as better results as their opposition who's doing it 3 to 4 times a week. Therefore, many athletes now being programmed by the strength and conditioning coach to perform multiple gym sessions, potentially even multiple daily, just for that frequency. However, there's some drawbacks to too much frequency, as it can lead to burnout and can lead to injury.
So the next topic is nutrition. So you're probably thinking, what is nutrition? It is about eating a regular balanced diet. Good nutrition helps fuel your body. Foods that you eat supply nutrients your body needs to maintain brain, muscles, bones, nerves, skin, even blood circulation and your immune system. So if you see a picture on the right, it's got a full plate, it's got everything that you should have daily in your body. So there's 7 groups which nutrition is divided to have a healthy and balanced diet. So these come under proteins, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, minerals, fibre, and water. So proteins help to build and repair muscle tissue. So if you've had a heavy gym session, you've had a training session that you've worked really hard in, cardiovascular and weight training, these help to repair them, build them stronger. So some examples of these are meats, like red meats especially, steaks, chicken, some fish helps well, eggs and anything dairy. Carbohydrates are your primary energy source. These are where your enzymes and your energy come from. So some examples of these are starchy products like pasta, rice and pasta. Fats, example of these are oils, butter, fatty fish, avocados. These are long-term energy storage, which will keep you going for longer. So you've had a tough session, like I said, it keeps you going for longer. These help for hormone production, cell membrane structure, which is good. Vitamins, these are organic compounds that the body needs in small amounts to function properly. They play a vital role in the metabolism of the body, the immunity, the growth and overall health of yourself. Minerals, they are inorganic nutrients essential for various bodily functions, including bone health, fluid balance, muscle contractions, nerve functions and enzyme activities. Fibres, these are a type of carbohydrates that cannot be digested by the human body. Unlike other carbohydrates, they break down into sugars. Fibres pass through the digestive system mostly intact, helping with digestion, gut health and overall well-being. And also, the last one on the plate is water. which is essential for hydration, digestion, temperature regulation, circulation. Water's like the one thing you can't live without, so it's got to be on the plate. So when I was doing my studies, I found articles relating to protein and protein powder. So I found articles which was in the favour of protein, where the results were saying that it was beneficial for growth in muscles, and the increased protein powder helps to add the muscle and the weight. So some negatives to this was that it was a meta-analysis, which means it was coming from other sources, so it wasn't especially reliable, and there was some ethical decisions as well. Another article I was researching was due to the addition of creatine. Creatine was found to also be successful but more harmful to the body than protein powder.
So now we're moving on to biomechanics of sport and exercise science and how different footwear affects running performance. So the biomechanics of sport and exercise is a study of how the body moves and the forces involved during physical activities. So it looks at things like how the muscles and joints work together, the motion of athletes and the impacts of different movements on performance and injury risk. It helps to improve athletic performance by optimising techniques and training methods. The study of biomechanics could be used in various fields like sports rehabilitation, ergonomics and robotics. Motion capture technology is often used in biomechanics to research to analyse movements in detail. By understanding how their bodies move and the forces at play during physical activity, they can optimise their techniques and improve efficiency and tailor their training programmes. Biomechanics helps to identify areas where an athlete may be at risk for injury. It also allows for adjustments to be made in their movements or training methods, leading to a better overall result in their sport. So I'm going to be talking about the basis code of conduct and how they should be implemented into research in the two articles that I studied. So the basis code of conduct sets some worthwhile ethical principles that should be used in research for both articles. Firstly, there is informed consent, where the aim of the study, risks and rights to withdraw are explicitly explained to all participants. Confidentiality must be exercised by anonymising data to protect participants' confidentiality. Scientists must also be truthful and honest by reporting all the findings accurately, even when they validate initial hypotheses. Safety is the concern and entails a great deal of risk, and it analyses so that the body needs of the studies do not injure participants. Lastly, researchers need to possess skills in biomechanics required to undertake the research appropriately to preserve the validity and reliability of the research findings. So now we're going to be discussing how ethics can affect validity and reliability, accuracy and precision. So ethics play a crucial role in establishing the validity and reliability of the research results. If the researchers are incompetent or subjective, then it severely undermines the precision and accuracy of the results. For instance, not having ethical clearance makes a study susceptible to questioning its authenticity, and therefore the method could be incorrect and impact the findings. So informed consent ensures that participants understand what is going on in the research and the risk of bias is reduced. Confidentiality and data protection are also needed. If confidential information is processed inappropriately, then responses by participants could be biased and therefore results will not be accurate. Also, researchers must exhibit professional and personal conduct in trying to introduce integrity into research. Slipping there is space for questionable practices compromising the research validity. Primarily, a solid ethical foundation guarantees reliability and validity, while unethical breaches can skew the research process and results.
So, done.
Oh,
That was so hard to say.
Well, I've done that.
Validity in response to
no.